The human was eating. Not rations, mind you. Not the gene-tailored nutrient paste we'd all been issued for the Gauntlet. No, this. This thing was sitting cross-legged on volcanic glass, sharp enough to shred Kevlar, surrounded by the screaming wind and toxic sulfur clouds of Krathnor's surface, cooking something over a small fire she'd somehow started in an atmosphere with 6% oxygen. "Are you insane?" I'd asked her, my translator struggling with what I can only describe as my species equivalent of a screech. She'd looked up at me, this tiny creature with her soft skin already sunburned and peeling, wearing what appeared to be hiking boots, held together with tape, and some kind of faded cloth covering that said, University of Colorado Geology Department, and smiled. Actually smiled, with these blunt little teeth that couldn't tear through anything tougher than overcooked vegetables. "Want some?" she'd offered, holding up a strip of something that was definitely not from our ration packs. "Caught a sulfur beetle. Tastes like lobster if you cook it right." That was 6 hours ago. My name is Vrokthar, and I'm from Khar'ix Prime, a world where the gravity would flatten most species into paste, where the apex predators have acid blood and hunt in packs of 30, where children learn to fight off meter-long parasites before they learn to speak. We are the Khar'ix, and for 200 years we have dominated the Galactic Council's survival core. We are Deathworlders. We are the toughest sentient species in known space. Or, well, we were. Let me back up. The Gauntlet is not a game. Let me be absolutely clear about that. It's a proving ground, a crucible where the Council tests species for combat readiness, resource management capability, and sheer survival instinct. Every 20 cycles they drop candidates from various worlds onto Krathnor, a planet so hostile that it makes my homeworld look like a vacation resort. Active volcanism, toxic, atmosphere, gravity at 1.8 standard, temperature swings of 70 degrees between day and night, and fauna that has evolved specifically to kill anything that moves. Only Deathworld species even bother to apply, and only the Khar'ix consistently survive. Until this cycle, we'd sent 47 participants to the Gauntlet. 43 had completed it. That's a 91% success rate in an event where the average species has a 12% survival rate. We are legends, stories, the standard against which all warrior cultures measure themselves. So when the Council announced that Earth, a newly contacted world, was sending a representative to the Gauntlet, we'd laughed. Actually laughed. I'd seen the preliminary data on humans. They were from a garden world with liquid water, stable tectonics, and a breathable atmosphere. Soft gravity, no natural weapons, no armor plating. They couldn't even regulate their own body temperature properly. "It will last 6 hours, my commanding officer had said, mandibles clicking with amusement. "Maybe less. The sulfur clouds alone will blind it." He'd been wrong about the timeline, but none of us could have predicted how wrong. The human's name was Dr. Cato Reeves, and she'd introduced herself to our cohort with a handshake, which I'd later learned was some kind of greeting ritual that involved gripping another being's manipulator appendage and moving it up and down. Bizarre. She was female of her species, approximately 40 standard years old, with grey streaks in her dark hair and a face that looked like it had spent considerable time squinting at things in bright sunlight. "Geologist," she'd explained when asked about her specialization. "Volcanology, specifically. Also did a stint in Antarctic research, but that's a long story." A geologist. They'd sent a rock scientist to a combat survival trial. The Khar'ix representative next to me, a decorated warrior named Threx Kal, who'd personally killed a Karaxian ridge hunter at age 12, had looked at me with what I can only describe as pity for the human species. We'd both been thinking the same thing. This was going to be a short, unpleasant death for Dr. Reeves, and Earth's reputation in the galactic community would never recover. The first test was the drop. They don't ease you into Krathnor. They seal you into an atmospheric entry pod with your basic kit, your rations, your emergency beacon, and they throw you at the planet from orbit. The pods are designed to be barely survivable, because the Council wants to see how you handle immediate, overwhelming trauma right out of the gate. I've done 3 training drops. Each one cracked at least 2 of my reinforced bones. Dr. Reeves had walked up to her pod, set down her personal bag, a battered thing covered in patches from various Earth locations. pulled out a thin metallic container and taken a long drink from it. Coffee, she'd explained to my confused expression. Can't function without it, and I'm guessing wherever I'm going doesn't have a Starbucks. I had no idea what a Starbucks was. I still don't. She'd climbed into her pod, strapped in, and I'd watched her through the observation window as the countdown began. Most first-timers show some fear response at this point. Elevated respiration, pupil dilation, stress pheromones. Dr. Reeves had pulled out a small device and started tapping on it with her fingers, her face completely relaxed. Threxcal had leaned over to me. Is that human sedated? I don't think so, I'd replied, watching as Dr. Reeves apparently decided to take a nap during the final 30 seconds before her pod was launched at a planet that had a 40% kill rate on the drop alone. The pods had fired. 7 hours later, I'd hit the surface, crawled out of my wreckage with 3 cracked ribs and a concussion, activated my beacon so the other Khar'ix could find me, and started the brutal process of establishing a base camp before nightfall. That's when I'd found her. Dr. Reeves had not only survived the drop, she'd somehow landed her pod in a thermally stable zone between 2 lava flows. While I was still trying to remember which direction was up, she'd unpacked her gear, identified the least toxic water source within a kilometer, set up what she called a solar still to purify it, and had begun mapping the local geology. With a pencil and paper, "GPS doesn't work here," she'd explained when I'd staggered into her camp, my beacon already pinging for medical extraction. Magnetic interference from the iron core. So, old-school navigation. "You look terrible, by the way. Those ribs?" I'd stared at her. This creature, this soft-skinned, fragile thing from a paradise world, was asking me if I needed help. "I'm fine," I'd growled, my pride outweighing my pain. "This is nothing." "Aha." She'd pulled out a white box with a red symbol on it. "Well, I've got some pretty good painkillers if you change your mind. And I can set bones, if it comes to that. Did a lot of field medicine in my Antarctica stint. You kind of have to when the nearest hospital is 4 months away by ship. 4 months. My translator had to recalculate that twice to make sure I'd heard correctly. I'd refused her help and limped away to find Threxcal. But I'd kept thinking about the humans' camp, the efficiency of it, the way she'd assessed threats and established infrastructure in the time it had taken me to simply survive. That had been the first hint that something was very wrong with our assumptions about humans. The second hint came when the sulfur beetles attacked. Now, sulfur beetles are about the size of my torso, with mandibles that can shear through combat armor and a paralytic venom that drops most species in seconds. They hunt in swarms of 15 to 20, and they're one of the primary reasons the Gauntlet has such a high mortality rate. Standard protocol, when you encounter them, is to run, find high ground, and prepare for a fighting retreat. I'd been following that protocol, along with Threxcal and 2 other Khar'ix warriors, when we'd heard the sound. Singing. Someone was singing. We'd found Dr. Reeves about 60 meters up a ridge, surrounded by at least 20 sulfur beetles, and she was. I still have trouble processing this. She was harvesting them, while humming something she later told me was called "Don't Stop Me Now." They're mostly exoskeleton, she'd explained as we'd watched in complete silence, our weapons ready for a rescue that was rapidly becoming unnecessary. The meat's in the thorax segments. High protein, good mineral content. I mean, you have to cook out the sulfur compounds, but that's just basic chemistry. She'd killed 6 of them, with a rock hammer, and then she'd eaten one. "You're welcome to join," she'd called out to us, waving cheerfully with a manipulator appendage still covered in beetle ichor. "I've got enough for everyone." Threxcal had actually taken a step back. This warrior, this legend who'd personally led raids on pirate strongholds and once held a defensive position for 6 hours against overwhelming odds, had retreated from a human offering to share her lunch. "What is she?" he'd whispered to me. I hadn't had an answer. That night, as we'd made camp in a lava tube Dr. Reeves had identified as thermally stable and defensible, we'd finally asked her the question that had been building in all our minds. "Your world," I'd said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Earth." The briefing said it was a garden world, stable, peaceful. "Oh, it is, Doctor," Reeves had agreed, checking her water purification setup. "Compared to this place, Earth is paradise. I mean, we've got our challenges, but nothing like." She gestured at the toxic hellscape around us. "This." "Then how?" Threxcal had demanded. "How are you?" He'd struggled for words. "How are you not dead, Doctor?" Reeves had looked up at him, and for the first time since we'd met her, I'd seen something sharp in her expression. Something that reminded me, uncomfortably, of the way apex predators assess their prey back on Khar'ix's prime. "Let me tell you about Earth," she'd said quietly. And she had. She'd told us about a world where the atmosphere was 20% combustible gas, where the weather could swing from deadly heat to killing cold in a matter of hours, where storms formed that could level entire cities. She'd told us about oceans deep enough to swallow mountains, about deserts that hadn't seen rain in decades, about jungles where every plant was poisonous and every animal was trying to kill you. She'd told us about the Antarctic, where she'd spent 2 years studying volcanoes under miles of ice, where the temperature could drop to -80 degrees, where one mistake meant freezing to death in minutes. She'd told us about her homeworld like it was the most dangerous place in the galaxy, and she'd smiled while doing it. "Earth isn't peaceful," she'd said. "Earth is actively hostile to human life, always has been. We evolved there anyway. We evolved to be persistence hunters, did you know that? We can't run fast, can't fight effectively, can't survive temperature extremes without tools. So we made tools, and we learned, and we adapted, because that's what we do. That's what we've always done." She'd pulled out her coffee container again, taken another drink. "Every species on my planet is trying to kill us. The weather is trying to kill us. The geography is trying to kill us. Hell, even the bacteria are trying to kill us. And we're still here, still thriving, still pushing into new environments, new challenges." Dr. Reeves had looked at each of us. "So when you ask me how I'm not dead on this planet," she gestured at Krathnor's hellscape, "this is just Tuesday for a field geologist from Earth." There had been a long silence. Then Threxcal had started laughing. Not the amused clicking from before, but something that sounded almost like panic. "You're Deathworlders," he'd said. "You're all Deathworlders. I mean, I don't know that term, Doctor," Reeves had replied. "But yeah, I guess we are." That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment I realized that we, the Khar'ix, the proud warriors from Khar'ix's prime, had made a critical error in our assessment of the galaxy. We'd thought we were special. We'd thought our harsh world, our brutal evolutionary pressure, our survival instincts made us unique, made us superior. But Earth was a death world that didn't look like one. It was a trap, a planet that smiled at you with liquid water and breathable air and moderate gravity, and then killed you with 1,000 invisible threats. And humans had evolved there not by becoming stronger or faster or tougher, but by becoming endlessly, terrifyingly adaptable. They were Deathworlders who'd learned to survive through intelligence instead of instinct, which, I was beginning to suspect, made them far more dangerous than we'd ever be. The Gauntlet was supposed to last 30 days. Dr. Reeves completed it in 12. Not by fighting her way through, not by enduring more than everyone else, but by treating Krathnor like it was just another field research site. She mapped the safe zones, identified edible food sources, established water purification protocols, and shared her findings with everyone. Khar'ix, Regulian shell warriors, even the Korthan tunnel fighters who normally refused to cooperate with other species. By day 8, half the participants were following her lead. By day 10, the council had to adjust the difficulty parameters because the survival rate was too high. By day 12, Dr. Cato Reeves walked up to the extraction point, submitted her completed survey data, and politely asked if there was somewhere she could get a decent cup of coffee. The council awarded her the highest marks in Gauntlet history. And Earth, the garden world, the peaceful blue marble that shouldn't have produced anything more threatening than philosophers and artists, was quietly reclassified. Deathworld. Class Omega. We'd been so wrong about humans. We hadn't realized how wrong until the war started. But that's a different story. The war came 6 months after the Gauntlet. Not with us, thank the ancestors. The Khar'ix had enough sense to recognize a predator species when we saw one, even if they wore soft skin and friendly smiles. No, the war came with the Zelthians, and it came because they made the same mistake we almost had. They thought humans were weak. The Zelthian Compact controlled 40 systems, had the second largest fleet in the Council, and had been spoiling for a fight with someone, anyone, who might challenge their expansion into the frontier territories. When Earth formally applied for Council membership, the Zelthians saw an opportunity. A young species, newly contacted, with no allies and no military reputation beyond one geologist who'd done well on a survival test. Easy prey. They'd issued what they called a territorial dispute over a mining colony in the Kepler 442 system. In reality, it was a pretense. They wanted to bloody the humans, establish dominance, maybe grab some territory and resources in the process. Standard Zelthian diplomacy, which is to say bullying backed by warships. The Council had expected Earth to back down or request mediation. Earth had done neither. "We'll handle it ourselves," the human ambassador had said. His name was something complicated I can't pronounce, but everyone called him Ambassador Wright. He was older than Dr. Reeves, with grey hair and the same unsettling calm she'd displayed on Krathnor. "Thank you for your concern." The Zelthians had sent a battle fleet, 12 heavy cruisers, 40 destroyer-class vessels, support carriers, enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to molten slag. Earth had sent 3 ships. 3. I'd been assigned as a military observer because of my experience with humans during the Gauntlet. The Council wanted someone who understood them, or at least someone who'd survived proximity to them for more than a week. I'd accepted because I was curious, and because some part of me, the part that had watched Dr. Reeves cook sulfur beetles while humming, wanted to see what humans did when they couldn't just adapt their way out of a problem. I'd expected a massacre. I'd gotten something else entirely. The first human ship to arrive at Kepler 442 was called the UNES Perseverance. Not a warship name by any standard military convention. No destroyer, or vengeance, or wrath of ancestors. Just perseverance, like they were going on a long hike instead of a battle. The captain was a woman named Commander Okafor, tall, dark-skinned, maybe 50 standard years old, with close-cropped hair and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She'd greeted me aboard her ship with that same handshake ritual, and I'd noticed her grip was exactly calibrated, firm without being aggressive, measuring me even in that simple gesture. "Vrokthar," she'd said, pronouncing my name perfectly on the first try, which even most Khar'ix couldn't do. "Dr. Reeves sends her regards. She's actually consulting on this operation." "Consulting?" I'd managed. "This is a military engagement." "Sure is." Commander Okafor had smiled, and I'd felt my secondary heart skip a beat. "Which is why we need someone who understands volatile environments and rapid adaptation to hostile conditions. Come on, I'll show you the bridge." The bridge of the Perseverance had been nothing like I'd expected. Most warships are built around intimidation and efficiency, all sharp angles and weapon displays, and tactical screens showing firing solutions. The Perseverance's bridge looked like, and I'm not exaggerating here, someone had crossed a military command center with a research laboratory. There were tactical stations, yes, but also sensor arrays that would have made a science vessel jealous, 3-dimensional terrain mapping, atmospheric analysis equipment, and an entire section dedicated to what the humans called environmental engineering. "We're not really built for ship-to-ship combat," Commander Okafor had explained, seeing my confusion. "None of our ships are. We didn't have time to develop proper military vessels before this whole situation kicked off, so we adapted what we had." Adapted what, exactly? Colony ships, deep space research vessels, long-range exploration craft. She gestured at the Perseverance. This girl was designed to find habitable worlds, assess their viability, and prepare them for human settlement. She's got enough firepower to deter pirates and deal with hostile fauna, but nothing like a real military vessel. I'd stared at her. "You brought colony ships to a fleet engagement?" "We brought the tools we had," she'd corrected. "And honestly, after you've spent 2 years keeping 1,000 colonists alive in deep space, managing their water recycling, their air filtration, their waste processing, their mental health, their medical emergencies, and their constant complaints about the food, well, fighting other ships seems almost straightforward by comparison." The Zelthian fleet had arrived in system 4 hours later. I'd watched from the observation deck as their formation emerged from FTL, a classic intimidation pattern designed to demonstrate overwhelming force. 52 ships arrayed in a sphere formation, weapons hot, shields at maximum. Beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way. The 3 human ships, by comparison, looked like confused children who'd wandered into adult business. The Zelthian fleet commander had opened a channel. His name was Khar'ix, and he was known for being theatrical. Human vessels, he'd broadcast on all frequencies. You are outnumbered 17 to 1. Your ships are inferior. Your species is untested in combat. I offer you one chance to retreat with your lives and your honor. Refuse, and we will demonstrate why the Zelthian compact is feared throughout this sector. There'd been a long pause. Then Commander Okafor had responded. Zelthian Fleet Commander Khar'ix, she'd said, her voice perfectly calm. I'm Commander Okafor of the UNES Perseverance. I've reviewed your fleet composition, and I have some concerns about your formation integrity in this particular stellar environment. Before we begin hostilities, I feel obligated to point out that you're currently positioned in the outer edge of an active coronal mass ejection path. Your shield harmonics are vulnerable to resonance cascade from the local stellar wind, and at least 6 of your vessels are showing signs of coolant stress that suggests your engineers didn't properly calibrate for this system's radiation levels. Another pause. Also, she'd continued, you're leaking plasma from your flagship's port nacelle, Seal 7 Alpha, if I'm reading the thermal signature correctly. Might want to address that before it becomes a problem. I'd pulled up our sensor data. She was right, about all of it. The humans had analyzed the entire Zelthian fleet, identified structural vulnerabilities, assessed environmental factors, and done a complete tactical workup in the time it had taken the Zelthians to issue their dramatic challenge. Khar'ix had sputtered. Actually sputtered. You dare to lecture me on naval operations? I have commanded fleets for 20 years. I'm sure you have, Commander Okafor had replied, and in most stellar environments, your formation would be perfectly adequate. But you're not fighting in most stellar environments, you're fighting in this one. And in this one, you've made some critical errors. Errors? Khar'ix's voice had risen. Errors? I will show you errors, human. All ships open fire. Reduce them to atoms. The Zelthian fleet had opened up with everything they had. And that's when I'd understood what Dr. Reeves had tried to tell us during the Gauntlet. Humans don't win by being stronger. They win by making the environment their weapon. The first salvo of missiles from the Zelthian fleet had seemed overwhelming, a cloud of ordnance that should have vaporized the human ships instantly. But Commander Okafor had plotted her position with the same precision Dr. Reeves had used, choosing her campsite on Krathnor. The Perseverance was positioned exactly at the edge of the coronal mass ejection path she'd mentioned, and as the missiles crossed into that region, the stellar radiation played hell with their guidance systems. 70% of them lost target lock. The remaining 30% ran into the second surprise. The human ships weren't firing conventional weapons. They were deploying something Commander Okafor called chuff drones, thousands of tiny objects that looked like debris but were actually sophisticated sensor decoys. Combined with the natural interference from the stellar wind, the Zelthian targeting solutions fell apart completely. Second wave, incoming, the human tactical officer had reported, a young man who looked like he should be in school, not on a warship. Particle beams, looks like. Adjust angle 17 degrees port, Commander Okafor had ordered. Put the gas giant's magnetosphere between us and them. The Perseverance had moved, and I'd watched as the Zelthian particle beams hit the gas giant's magnetic field and scattered harmlessly into space. They're adapting, someone else had called out, shifting formation to compensate. Good, Commander Okafor had said. Get me Dr. Reeves on the line. Dr. Reeves's face had appeared on the screen. She'd been on one of the other human ships, and she looked exactly like she had on Krathnor, minus the sunburn. Same casual clothes, same coffee container in hand, same expression of mild interest in a dangerous situation. Commander, she'd said, how's it going? They're moving into intercept pattern Theta 7, Commander Okafor had reported. Right where you predicted. Perfect. Doctor. Reeves had consulted something off-screen. Trigger the package in, let's say, 90 seconds. That'll put them in the optimal position. Package? I'd asked. What package? Commander Okafor had smiled that unsettling smile again. Dr. Reeves, would you like to explain? Sure. Doctor. Reeves had taken a sip of her coffee. So, fun fact about this system. It's got a really unstable asteroid belt left over from a planetary collision about 50 million years ago. Most species avoid it because it's unpredictable and dangerous. but if you know what you're doing, you can use it. She'd pulled up a three-dimensional map that looked like chaos, given visual form, thousands of asteroids in overlapping, intersecting orbits. We've spent the last 72 hours mapping this mess and identifying what I call cascade points, places where a small impact will trigger a chain reaction of collisions. The Zelthians are currently maneuvering into position to cut off our escape routes, which is textbook tactics. Unfortunately for them, textbook tactics don't account for environmental engineering. You're going to weaponize an asteroid field? I'd breathed. We're going to encourage it to express its natural destructive tendencies, Dr. Reeves had corrected. There's a difference. Mostly semantic, but still. 90 seconds later, the second human ship, which had been quietly positioning itself during the entire engagement, fired a single missile into a carefully selected asteroid. And the cascade began. It was beautiful and terrible to watch. One asteroid hit another, which hit three more, which hit dozens more. Within 5 minutes, the entire region of space the Zelthian fleet was moving through became a shooting gallery of high-velocity debris. Their shields, designed to stop energy weapons and missiles, hadn't been calibrated for the kinetic impact of multi-ton rocks moving at orbital velocity. Ships scattered, formation broke, and in that moment of chaos, the three human vessels struck. But they didn't strike with weapons. They struck with information. All Zelthian vessels, Commander Okafor broadcast. We've identified critical structural failures in 41 of your 52 ships. We've marked them on your tactical display. You have approximately 18 minutes before catastrophic systems failures begin cascading through your fleet. We didn't cause these failures. They're pre-existing maintenance issues and design flaws we identified in your first engagement. The asteroid field just stressed your already compromised systems past their safety thresholds. She'd paused. We're transmitting repair protocols now. You can save most of your crews if you act fast. Or you can keep fighting, and we'll see who runs out of functioning ships first. Your choice, Commander Khar'ix. There'd been a long, agonizing silence. Then, one by one, the Zelthian ships had begun emergency repairs and withdrawal procedures. The battle was over, 0 casualties on either side, and Earth had just defeated a major military power without firing a shot in anger. I'd found Dr. Reeves in the Perseverance's observation lounge afterward. She'd been sitting by herself, looking out at the stars, still holding that coffee container. You planned all of this, I'd said, sitting down next to her. From the beginning. Not planned, she'd corrected. Prepared. There's a difference. Planning assumes you know what's going to happen. Preparation means you're ready for whatever does happen. But you knew they'd attack. You knew how they'd attack. We made educated guesses based on standard military doctrine and their known operational patterns, Dr. Reeves had agreed. But the specifics? Those we adapted to in real time, just like on Krathnor. I'd been quiet for a long moment. My people thought we were the standard, I'd finally said. Thought that because we evolved on a harsh world, because we're strong and tough and hard to kill, that made us the galaxy's warriors, the benchmark for what a dangerous species looks like. And now I realize we were looking for the wrong things. I'd gestured at the space where the Zelthian fleet was retreating. Strength doesn't matter if your enemy never lets you use it. Toughness doesn't matter if they avoid direct confrontation. We were so proud of surviving our harsh world that we never learned what you learned. Which is, that survival isn't about enduring the environment, I'd said. It's about making the environment work for you. You don't fight the planet. You don't fight the enemy. You understand them, adapt to them, and turn their own nature against them. Dr. Reeves had smiled. You know what the scary thing is? What? Earth didn't make us this way on purpose. Our planet wasn't trying to teach us lessons or forge us into warriors. It was just indifferent. Just a collection of systems and forces that didn't care whether we lived or died. And that indifference, that complete lack of malice or mercy, taught us the most important lesson of all, which is that nothing in the universe cares about fair fights or honor or who deserves to win. She'd taken another sip of coffee. So you better learn to use every advantage you can find, because the universe certainly isn't going to give you any breaks. 6 months after that, the Council formally acknowledged Earth's application for membership, not as a minor member or a probationary species, but as a full Council member with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was close enough. The Khar'ix voted in favor. So did most of the species who'd been at the Gauntlet with Dr. Reeves. We'd learned our lesson. The Zelthians abstained, which was probably wise of them. Earth's first act as a council member was to establish something they called the Environmental Adaptation Corps, a multi-species organization dedicated to teaching other civilizations the techniques humans had, developed for surviving on a hostile world. Dr. Reeves was appointed as the first director, and within a year, survival rates on frontier colonies had increased by 40%. Turns out, when you spend your entire evolutionary history learning to survive on a planet that's actively trying to kill you, you get pretty good at helping other species not die in hostile environments. Who knew? I serve as a liaison officer now, coordinating between the Khar'ix military and Earth's various research and exploration divisions. It's good work, important work, and it keeps me busy. But sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about that first day on Krathnor. I think about watching Dr. Reeves cook sulfur beetles over an impossible fire while toxic clouds swirled around us. I think about her smile when she'd explained that Earth was trying to kill humans just as much as Krathnor was, and I think about what it means that humans, these soft, fragile creatures from a beautiful blue world, turned out to be the most dangerous species any of us had ever encountered. Not because they were strong, not because they were tough, but because they looked at a universe that didn't care whether they lived or died, and they decided that was fine. They'd figure it out anyway. That's what makes humans terrifying. Not their weapons or their technology or their combat skills. Their absolute, unshakable refusal to accept that anything is impossible. They're Deathworlders who don't look like Deathworlders, and by the time you realize what they are, they've already adapted to everything you can throw at them. The Khar'ix thought we were the toughest species in the galaxy. Turns out, we were just the toughest species we'd met, until we met humans, and they taught us that survival isn't about being the strongest or the fastest or the most heavily armed. It's about being too stubborn to quit, too clever to fight fair, and too adaptable to ever stop learning. Dr. Reeves retired from the Corps last year. She's back on Earth now, teaching at some university, probably inspiring a whole new generation of humans to look at hostile environments and think, yeah, I could survive that. She sent me a message when she left, just 3 words. Thanks for everything. I still have no idea what she was thanking me for. I'm the one who learned from her. We all did. And the galaxy, I think, is better for it, even if it's also a lot more complicated now that humans are part of it. But that's adaptation for you. Nothing stays simple once humans get involved. Nothing at all.